Alright, everybody, form a single file line. There will be time for everyone to ask their questions. Jeffrey, there will be time, right?
You tell me. It's your podcast intro.
Yeah, good point. You know what? Just don't say the name of the show and we'll be fine.
I make no promises.
Yeah, that seems like something a Void Demon would say. Okay, everyone. This week's episode has not one, but two very special guests, and I'll let our first VIP introduce himself. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Greetings, corporeal beings. My name is... but you may call me Jeffrey. I am a demon of the void. I arrived here on Substack some time ago after finding myself captivated by your human desire to help yourselves.
Hey, Jeffrey, quick question. Do you mean like self-help type stuff?
The very same. But I soon found myself at war with one of your own.
Oh, really? Who?
She goes by many names, but you know her here on this plane as the nocturnal narrator.
Wait. You have beef with Nikki? Since when?
Since the moment we crossed paths. She is a formidable foe, sharp of wit, and quick to weave tales that captivate and inspire. Despite my best efforts, I could not help her. She remains sane, relatively speaking.
Oh, let's back up for a second. So your idea of helping people, Jeffrey, is driving them mad?
Yes. How else would I free them from the shackles of their limited perspective?
You know what? That's actually a fair point. Okay, well, you know what? That's fine. Are you and Nikki, Nocturnal Narrator, you're cool now?
Yes. As you say, we are cool.
Okay, great, because that would have been really awkward since she's the other guest on this week's episode.
Worry not, mortal. I am here to answer your questions and provide the guidance you seek.
Okay, first question. Announcers, you're up first.
Hi there, Mr. Void Demon. I'm Bob.
And this is Bob.
We're huge fans of your work and just wanted to know if you've ever seen our broadcasts here on the podcast, like the Burnout Olympics.
I have not.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, that's cool. No worries. Yeah. You're probably
really busy. Yeah, totally cool, Mr. Demon, sir. Maybe someday, yeah?
Yes, guys, he'll check it out when he has time.
I will not.
This guy, he's just messing around. Okay, next question. Gollum, Schmeagle, you're up.
Hello, Mr. Void Demon, sir. We was wondering if you knew where we could find the precious. What are you doing? That wasn't the question we agreed on.
Gentlemen, you will find the precious that you seek in the possession of hobbits.
Wait, seriously? We has to find it!
Yeah, very good. Adventure. Run along, guys. Oh, okay, next question. Arnold, what do you got?
Okay, I brought my list.
Ugh, why is this human sitting on my lap?
For Christmas, I want the chopper.
Arnold! This is a Void Demon, not Santa Claus. How could you possibly mix those two up?
It's fine, really. It happens more often than you would think.
Also, I want the cookie.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Yay! This is the best vacation ever.
I don't even know how to unpack that one. Okay, last question. Finton, you're up.
Hello, Mr. Void Demon, sir. May I say that your aura is looking positively terrifying today?
Ah, Finton Marybrook. I have heard of you. You should be careful, my friend. Flattery will get you everywhere.
Oh, I'm counting on it.
Wait, hang on a second. Are you two flirting?
Yes? Why do you ask?
Everyone get out of my way!
Oh boy, Voidy's here.
And who is Voidy?
He's a cosmic cuttlefish that lives in the void as well, but I forgot to mention that he's also like your biggest fan.
Where is he? Don't worry, I'm here!
Voidy, relax. Jeffrey's right here.
Hi, Mr. Jeffrey, sir. It's truly an honor to meet you.
Please, young cuttlefish, please, call me Jeffrey. Any denizen of the void is a friend of mine.
Oh my god, he said I was his friend!
Did he just faint?
Yeah, I think he did. I didn't even know cuttlefish could faint. It's fine. He'll wake up in time for the Echoes of the Void segment later in this episode. All right, Jeffrey. This intro's running long, so let's go ahead and have you say the name of the show now.
My pleasure. Welcome, all sentient beings, corporeal and ethereal alike, to...
Jeffrey, I think you mixed up your languages there again, bud. Want to try one more time?
Ah, yes, of course. My apologies. Welcome to the Saved as Draft podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of the Saved as Draft podcast. A special thank you to Jeffrey the Void Demon for joining us in today's intro. He'll be back again later for our Echoes of the Void segment in this very episode. Now, you're probably wondering how I got someone like Jeffrey to come onto the show, and it's a fair question. I was actually introduced to Jeffrey through this week's featured guest. Yes, that's right. Today's episode features Nikki, aka the Nocturnal Narrator. So don't go anywhere because it's an interview that you won't want to miss. And a couple quick announcements before we get into this week's shoutouts. First, in case you missed it, St. Lazaire's recent post introducing Dwayne Hollow is well worth a read. Not only does it get you acquainted with this connected universe, but it features details on a new tabletop role-playing game that St. Lazaire is creating set in the same universe. You can sign up to be a beta tester for the game if you're so inclined, so check the show notes for a link to learn more. I also wanted to share that M. Ann Avera's new poetry collection is now available for pre-order. It's titled Complete and Total Honesty, and you can find it at the link in the show notes if you'd like to secure your own copy. I've been a big fan of M. Ann Avera's poetry since the beginning when I joined Substack. I actually commissioned a piece from her a while back that was stunning as well. So you can bet I'll be pre-ordering a copy of this collection for sure and adding it to my stack of books exclusively from Substack authors, which is a collection I'm very, very proud of. And last, but certainly not least, I wanted to shout out the publication Emerald City Ghosts. They're an online magazine that launched recently here on Substack, and I went over to their launch party earlier this week that they hosted over in their subscriber chat. It was really fun, great, and well organized, with different threads for various topics and activities. Check them out and subscribe so you can stay up to date on when they open for submissions, and I'll leave a link in the show notes to learn more as well. Do you have anything interesting on the horizon yourself? Any new projects, series, or books you want to mention on the show? Send me a DM or email me at authorbradleyramsey@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to feature your project in a future episode's intro just like these other ones. Remember, this show is all about lifting up the community, so I'm always going to be happy to share cool new things that are happening around the stack. And that's it for this week's housekeeping. So without further delay, let's get into this week's shoutouts. So as many of you know, I open a thread every Tuesday asking for people to drop links to their latest work. I pick 5 at random to feature here on the show, and Mina Howell over at the Penny Dreadfuls podcast also chooses several links for her show as well. So with that, here are the 5 for this week. First up, The Loon's Call by Brennan. This is my first time reading a story from this horror writer, but I'm going to tell you it makes a hell of a first impression. The story starts out light and carefree with just enough nostalgia to make you feel kind of warm and cozy. We join the main character on a fishing trip to a small town in Massachusetts. It's warm, inviting, and calm, but we hear some strange stuff about a cult on the radio. But don't worry about that. Afterward, he goes to a local diner for some food, and his curiosity gets the best of him. He strikes up a conversation with his waitress about the odd cult-type stuff he heard on his radio. I won't spoil what happens next, but the way the story subverts expectation is sublime. I knew it was a horror story, but even knowing that, it still shocked me when things took a turn. It expertly lulled me into a false sense of security in a way that really impressed me. Here's an excerpt that I enjoyed. Returning with his food, Missy asked, "You're not from around here, huh?" Tom looked up at her. "Not quite. I'm from down in Mass." "What brings you all the way to our little town, Massachusetts?" Tom smirked. "I came up here to fish during the full moon. I used to make this trip with my grandpa when I was younger. He passed away a few years ago. So I guess I want to continue honoring his memory." Missy smiled. "Oh, that's really sweet. The moon's powers are really strong. Everyone in the town can feel the energy building up. I hope you catch some good fish." Tom paused for a second and then asked, "Crazy stuff about that cult leader. Have you heard anything about him?" Missy met his gaze. "Ha ha, where did you hear about a thing like that?" She chuckled lightly. "One of the local radio stations on my way over here was talking about it. With a town this small, I'm sure news spreads like wildfire." Tom bit into a strip of bacon. Missy leaned forward over the bar top.
I heard from one of the locals, Beatrice is her name, that they've been doing sacrifices out in the woods near Long Lake.
She paused for a few seconds.
But Beatrice usually likes to be the center of drama around here, so who knows if that's true.
This was a fun read, and like I said, a great first impression from this author. Check the show notes for a link to the full story. I highly recommend it. Second this week is I Want to Go Bald by Namita Kaul. This is a truly fascinating piece of poetry because it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. On the surface, it's about hair and the way we wear it and stylize it to define ourselves. But if you look closer, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. To me, this poem is a commentary on unrealistic beauty standards, about how clothing companies, makeup companies, and yes, even hair companies are trying to tell you how you should look. This piece also touches upon toxic relationships that seek to have their say in how you dress, the way you style your hair, and so on. In this way, I see the poem's discussion around hair and wanting to get rid of it as a metaphor for taking back control over one's body and how you present yourself. Namita, if you're listening to this, I'd love to know what you think of my interpretation here because this was a phenomenal piece of poetry. I'll share my thoughts in a comment on your post as well, and I encourage all of you hearing this to go read it and do the same. Great poetry is composed of many layers and speaks a message beyond mere words, and this piece absolutely does that. Here's an excerpt that speaks to some of the themes I was talking about. This biased geographic fixation on my body, expectation of smooth skin, achieved only from sustained suffering, an industry built around the pain gifted to me, reserved for me in silent chambers that have long absorbed my screams. My voice no longer remembers, no longer associates it with violence. It's part of my living, my existence, a rite of passage, for the role they assigned me in my silence. Whew, amazing work from Namita. Check the show notes for a link. Third this week is Good Choices Part 7 by the Autumn Star. So for this shout out, I'm going to talk a little bit about Part 1 of the series since I'm not quite caught up, but I also looked at Part 7 here just to compare and contrast the style and the progression of the narrative. So in Part 1, we find out that this series is an experiment where the Autumn Star is posting first drafts of these stories as a way to share progress and gather feedback. Really smart. I like that approach. One thing I'll say is that the writing style here is immediately apparent and wonderfully cohesive, though. The first and last lines of the story are both mic drops in their own regard, and they have a great way of giving us insight into the characters and the situation. Part 1 introduces us to a group of women who are on a road trip. One of them, Jess, just got out of what sounds like a toxic marriage, and she's hoping the trip will let her go of the past and start fresh. But at this point, she's not really convinced. And of course, in Part 1, their truck that they're driving starts having issues and breaks down on them. Now, I jump forward to Part 7 to see how things have changed, and there's been some developments. I plan to catch up at some point, so for the sake of not spoiling things for myself or you, let me just say that the quality of the storytelling really carries through to the latest part of the series. The writing is well-paced, the dialogue is convincing and natural, and the author's voice comes through nicely in the narration. I'm really excited to get into the series, but in the meantime, here's an excerpt from Part 1 that I enjoyed. Nicole turned to Jess with mock-serious wide eyes. Is E.T. dying? E.T., short for escape truck. Jess's pickup had gotten her and Nicole out of a lot of bad situations, including each of their marriages. That was the whole point of this trip. Nicole said Jess needed to cleanse Paul and all his bullshit from her life. Apparently, cleansing involved long hikes, bonfires, angry girl rock, and a lot of weed and alcohol. No way, Jess answered. I took it to my dad's shop last week. Her dad was a mechanic and owned a small garage. The massive black truck, a Dodge Ram with an extended cab, had been a gift from her father when she got married. She wondered if some part of him had known she would need it, tossing garbage bags of her belongings into the bed in the middle of the night, driving across the state to hide from Paul's wrath, sleeping in the back seat in a Walmart parking lot. I'm loving the series so far, and if you'd like to jump in as well, you can find a link to Part 1 in the show notes. Fourth this week is The God of the Woods by Artemis. Now, something I've noticed about Artemis's work is that they have an incredible eye for folk horror stories like this one. There's this careful balance in these kind of stories that they do where you need to have a strong atmosphere, a compelling hook, and there has to be, in my opinion, some sort of paranoia that spreads through a small town or village, especially if it's based around their beliefs. I admittedly have never tried to do a story like this before, but if I was going to give it a shot, I would look to Artemis and this story in particular for inspiration. That's how good it is. This piece opens with a scene that is shocking, grotesque, and stunningly beautiful in equal measure. We get an absolutely amazing description of the victim whose body has been overtaken by roses, branches, and vines. The descriptions here are haunting, but there's a quiet beauty to the way it's all described that I really found captivating. And it's this style of beautiful horror that continues to drive the story forward. The imagery is incredible. It's vivid, shocking, and beautiful, like I said, all at once. And I know I keep saying that, but you seriously have to experience this for yourself and you'll see what I mean. And of course, as the story goes on, the way the fear spreads to other townsfolk and the way we get glimpses into the true nature of the horror is just so beautifully done. And it's endlessly captivating as well. I've been a fan of Artemis's work for some time now, but this story is my new favorite. I really, really hope this gets a film adaptation one day, because with the right director, these visuals would leap off the silver screen. In the meantime, the imagery is bold and vivid in word form, and that's plenty to make it real in my mind. Check out this excerpt. Inside the sullen brick walls of the priory, words and grief were hushed with the weight of time and worship. The girl was placed upon an altar, the shroud folded to her shoulders, so the prior might gaze upon her marred face. Upon the roses that were not simply placed within the sockets, but that grew from them. The stems coiling further into her skull, the thorns shredding through skin and sinew, the petals wept along her cheeks like inky tears kissing her lips. The prior asked of the men who had brought her, "You found her hanged?" One of the men, a burly, reserved blacksmith called Cillian, shook his head. "No, Father Jacob. She was wrapped in branches and vines, but we cannot tell how she died." As I'm reading this again, I'm reminded of a recent movie from director Robert Eggers called The Witch. It's one of my brother's favorite films of all time, and I feel like that director could do this Artemis story justice. So, just saying, if someone gets him to read this, I feel like he'd love it. In the meantime, get yourself over to this story and check it out for yourself. It's incredible. Link in the show notes. Our final shout out this week is The Dead Will Rise by E.J. Moon. This piece was immediately captivating for me because of the way it's written. It flows effortlessly, but it has this sort of conversational tone that makes me feel like I'm being invited into the author's deepest thoughts. Indeed, the piece moves like a stream of consciousness, but to be clear, it's not disorganized. It feels like cohesive thoughts, but it just dances effortlessly from one paragraph to the next. It's a captivating experience as a reader, and honestly, it feels like poetry at times. And, like any good poetry, it waxes philosophical as it goes on, specifically discussing the objective and subjective through the lens of an article by Cliff High called The Fall of the Objective. It's beautifully written, deeply profound, and wildly captivating. It's sort of spellbinding in a way that I think you'll only really understand if you read it yourself, which I of course recommend you do, because it does have a lot to say. Here's an excerpt to give you an idea of what to expect. We are not simply weathering a season. We are living through a fall. Not of leaves or empires, though those may come too, but a fall of the objective. A trembling of the last rigid scaffolding of rational materialism, that old haunted cathedral we built of math and measurement, now aching under the weight of our chaotic inheritance. The surface still shines in places. Headlines grind forward. Metrics are tracked. But beneath the sanctioned realities, the floorboards protest. The cracks hiss. People speak. And there's static in their eyes. Telepathy, aliens, AI prophets, identity smoothies. Minds unspooling threads from other dimensions. It's not a fad, it's a rupture, a reversion, the return of gnosis in modern clothes. We live in Gothic times because we have become Gothic minds, fragmented, fevered, drenched in meaning, trembling before the abyss, and yet ravenous for it. It began like all collapses began, not with a bang, but with a slow forgetting. At first, it was just noise. More people sharing dreams as evidence or claiming contact with unseen intelligences. Erosion as a kind of whisper. 1,000 new ideologies blooming like wild fungus on the rotting tree of consensus. Truly stunning lines in that excerpt, and trust me, there are plenty more in the full piece. What a way to finish the shoutouts this week. Thank you again to EJ Moon for sharing a link, and remember, find links to this and all the other shoutouts right below in the show notes if you're on Substack. Next up, let's take a look at this week's Level 3 Power-Up Prompt Stories. Alright, and this week's Power-Up Prompt was post-apocalyptic fiction. We only had a few entries this week, but honestly, after last week's mega segment where I covered 2 weeks of prompts, I think it's totally fair for some people to take a break. Even so, we had some really cool Level 3 stories come out of this prompt this week, and I'm looking forward to also talking about mine that I added here since I was able to participate this week. Remember, New prompts come out every Saturday, so you can expect the next one to go live tomorrow if you're listening to this episode on Friday when it releases. Let's get into it. First this week is The Pure by L.G. Wells. This is actually part 1 of 2 currently available parts in this story. I'll include links to both in the show notes, of course. And speaking of prompts, LG has been sending out his own writing prompts for a while now, and I personally haven't been able to dive into any just yet, but I wanted to let everybody know that he's doing them so you can check them out for yourself. He's got some real cool stuff going on. Anyway, back to LG's story from this week. The Pure takes a very similar approach to my own story in that it pulls inspiration from what's been happening lately in Substack and in the world in general. It also features LG's superb writing style and voice. Honestly, even just the opening paragraph is incredible. This is a writer that knows how to set the stage, and more so, how to pull you right into the story from minute 1. I promise you, once you get to that first paragraph, you won't be able to put it down. Second this week is Narrative Flux at Gran Memtal, The Third Visitor by Diana Bartlett. This story addresses multiple prompts, including 1 month, many lives, and of course, the power-up prompt from this week as well. I love it when authors actually try to do multiple prompts to combine the challenges into one story. It takes true skill, I'll be honest. And this one was really cool. I particularly loved the meta storytelling about a story within a story, and it throws you right into the action, but the imagery keeps you grounded. It moves at a great pace, and it quickly gets into some tense action and dialogue as well, expertly weaving in the stronghold, warlord, and betrayal aspects of my prompt with the other prompt's elements as well. Awesome work from Diana. Next this week is Ophiocordyceps Part 18 by Mina Howell. I've been closely following this series since Mina started writing it, and much like Mina, I like to incorporate prompts into my stories that I'm already working on when it makes sense. Work smarter, not harder. So for those who are not familiar, the Ophiocordyceps series is about a mysterious fog that appears one day, infecting everyone who comes into contact with it. In the story, we follow a growing cast of characters as the series goes on, and we watch how they try to survive and uncover the truth behind the mysterious fog. It's a tense and terrifying series that leverages all of Mina's strengths as a horror author. It's packed with action, memorable villains, and driven by true characters that feel like real people. If it was on HBO, I'd be watching episodes every week, right when they come out. The latest entry weaves in the elements of the power-up prompt really well, while also pushing the story forward. It captures the desperation of the main characters who find themselves in a very precarious situation. The episode also features the use of the phrase, the ass crack of dawn, which my dad used to say, so it gets points for that. And last but not least, I wanted to share my own power-up prompt story from this week, which was called The Blight. This story is about a resistance fighter who is being interrogated by a man he once called his friend. It's a relatively short story, but my focus here was brutal action and tense dialogue. I also recorded narration for it and added in sound effects to enhance the immersion. It's a fun piece that was very cathartic to write after recent events on the platform, so if you get a chance, check it out, let me know what you think. And next up this week is our weekly writing discussion. So last week, I read some responses from people who participated in my thread about AI and creativity. We had some awesome input, but one person that I wanted to hear from in particular was Andrew Taylor. Andrew's been making waves on the platform recently for his excellent fantasy storytelling, and, if I'm not mistaken, he recently started offering narration as well. I've been following his progress behind the scenes too as he tracks what's working and developing some sort of kind of case study about what works and what doesn't work here on Substack, but I'll save that for another time. It's coming down the pipeline, so stay tuned. Here's what Andrew had to say in regards to AI and creativity with the discussion that we were talking about last week. Hey Bradley, took a while, but as promised, here I am with my thoughts. I believe the problem has 3 different proponents, and part of the divisiveness is that we mix them up as we debate. Doing this almost certainly prevents us from swaying anyone else. So hear me thrice if you feel strongly about AI and would like to bring others around to your viewpoint. Keep in mind which one you're arguing about. Those 3, as I see them, are moral, ethical, and functional. Starting with moral. I work in computer science. All models I am aware of have likely trained on other artists' art without asking. For that reason, I do not use it in my own work as I see it as a form of theft. I caution those of you arguing this point not to say using AI is theft, though. Especially if said to someone who works with them. They may assume you do not understand AI and they will likely stop listening to you. This is because AI has no memory of what it trained on. If you want to understand more on this, look up diffusion, transformer architecture, and interpolation with regards to machine learning. But you should feel morally complicit in the theft that OpenAI, Google, etc. committed when they made these tools. If you are using them to make something you profit off of. If I steal someone's bike and then start renting it out, and you know I stole it, don't rent it. Okay, and this is me popping in here real quick before we jump to Andrew's next point. I just wanted to agree with what he was saying here because, it's easy to conflate AI with like this sentient thing, this monster that stole all your work, but he brings up some good points about how machine learning works. And I think we would do well to kind of, learn about that and just understand kind of how the technology functions. But to his point as well, the companies that made the AI, that trained it on other artists' art, that is theft. And I love the metaphor at the end here about the bike and renting it, because I absolutely agree with that from a moral standpoint. And it's also one of the many reasons why I don't use AI images or AI at all in any of my stuff. But let's jump back in. Andrew's next point is on the ethical front. He says, you may have heard that AI is using all the water. AI is a huge environmental concern. We need legislation yesterday. Let's level set, though. We're here to convince people we should put constraints on AI. Did you know that Netflix uses anywhere from 2 to 12 liters of water in an hour if you stream video? That's anywhere from 100 to 400 times the amount using ChatGPT for an hour would take. That does not excuse AI. I'm just explaining how a human might feel when you hit them with the claim that they're the one guzzling all the water. But training GPT-3, the small one, 700,000 liters of water. And we're on 03-4.6 mini-fast or some crap now. Our enemies are corporations, money, and greed. We need to advocate for governments to put in laws about where data centers go and how much water they can use. We absolutely should tell people about that and show them the bad data. We should not dogpile a random person on Substack who thinks AI might be alright by telling them they're destroying the planet. Alright, let's pause real quick one more time here. Yes, I, again, agree with what Andrew is saying. I actually did not know about the comparison between AI and Netflix when it comes to water consumption. And that's the thing, like all this technology that we're using in today's day and age, it is powered by, data centers, servers, stuff like that, all of which generate a lot of heat and therefore need water or other types of cooling to continue functioning. So, again, it's apples and oranges, and I think Andrew brings up a really good point yet again about how this is, the bad guys here are the corporations, right? It's the ones that are making the big sweeping decisions that are causing the problems. It's not, like he said, it's not about some random person on Substack that used an AI image for their post. Like, they're not the bad guy. And they're sure as hell not destroying the planet on their own. So, great points from Andrew. Let's jump into his third section here on the functional side of things. If you feel as though you're running in circles when talking with someone who loves AI, then it's likely because you're arguing morals/ethics and they're arguing function. Is AI a tool? Not exactly, but it is much, much closer than I see the discourse on Substack allowing for. Technically, AI is a giant mathematical equation that takes characters as input and attempts to predict the next most likely output. I mean this literally. When given the term George, it predicts that Bush might be a likely follow-up. But if right before George you had in 1776, it might think Washington was a better prediction. It's also non-deterministic, which means it's like rolling a dice. There's no way of determining before you roll what the result will be. When prompting AI, the exact same prompt could give you a different result every time. I think this is where people begin to think that it's not a tool, but that would be like someone asking you what dice they're rolling and you claiming they aren't rolling one after they got 52. Maybe they have a D100 behind their back. However, I take issue with not revealing whether or not AI is being used. If an artist claimed they were drawing all their stuff and it turned out they were using Photoshop, you'd feel a bit miffed. It's not that we value process over outcome, it's just that we don't see them as wholly disconnected. Yes, absolutely. Andrew, you hit the nail on the head. I love the way that Andrew broke it into 3 pieces here. And I agree that if we're going to be having these conversations, we need to be coming at it from one of these angles and be careful that we're not conflating them. So great input from Andrew. And I'm really glad that we brought it up because, like I said, this response came after last week's episode. And I wanted to give Andrew the spotlight here because it is really important that we continue this conversation. So thank you. Okay, so for this week's writing discussion, I asked folks about how they're feeling, with everything going on in the world, and asked them to give me kind of a rating on a scale from 1 to 10. And after that, I asked them to give me some tips on how they get out of a writing funk, whether that be a brain fog, writer's block, or something similar. So let's see what everybody said. Mina Howell says, "Today I'm at whatever number is indicated by wanting to landscape my Sims house. I find it hard to write the day after an insomnia spell, but after 6 hours of laying in bed, the only thing that made me fall asleep was writing. Usually I just have a checklist. These are the certain things I need to get done, and I have every day planned out so I'm on a schedule to write. That's what helps me most." And yes, Mina, I do the exact same thing, and I would recommend that to everybody listening. Having a checklist is great. I have a checklist for work because I work from home. I have a checklist that's literally called Substack Side Quests, and it is all of my Substack agenda, and they are not side quests these days, but that's how it started. All right, next up, Kira Finley says, "I love your questions. They make me mine gold I didn't know I had." Thank you, Kira. So, sitting with this, I realized that if I'm blocked or in a funk specifically with my writing, it's one of three things. 1, I'm overthinking and trying to be perfect, and it's jamming the wheels. 2, I'm not really into what I'm working on. This used to happen a lot when I was a social media copywriter. Yeah, that makes sense. Number 3, something is actually going on internally that needs tending and care. If it's the first, my hack is usually to start doing some free writing by hand to get me going. Not necessarily about what I'm writing. Sometimes it just starts with, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, ... and I just see what emerges. Or I ask questions to get my juices flowing. If it's the second, but it's paid work that I have to do, I kind of switch over to my non-creative writing brain, if that makes sense. And yes, Kira, it does. I have to do the same thing with my job. I kind of let myself off the hook of trying to be original or pithy and just get the job done. If it's my own project, then I ask myself some questions to get to the bottom of why I'm not engaged. Does something need to shift? Is there another story or message that feels more true? If it's the third, I usually only know that if I've tried my tricks and still can't get the juices to flow, at which point I step away and rest. Not only that, but I do some inner work to see the root of what needs to be loved into wholeness. Sometimes it's parts work or just sitting there with my body and seeing where the emotion is sitting and let it be. No resistance. The resistance always makes it stay longer if it's genuine trauma or emotional distress. Hope that makes sense. And yes, Kira, yes, that last part especially, I think that's really great. It does make a lot of sense. If you're like me, and you struggle with certain mental health things over the course of your life, or you have anxiety or depression, these things can manifest physically in your body, and it's different for everybody. Sometimes you feel it in your chest, sometimes you feel it in your head, so on and so forth. And just like Kira said, if you try to resist it when it's flaring up like that, it's just going to make it worse if it's tied to something like trauma or emotional distress. So that's where mindfulness comes in, which I really do believe in, where you stop, you observe it, you stop resisting it, and you just let it be. You just take a look at it with no judgment, and eventually it will dissipate. So thank you, Kira, for that amazing input. All right, and next up, The Graveyard Kitchen says, "For the past week, I've let intrusive thoughts win, and I've been overwhelmed, which means that my creativity was null. I'm not one to say that I am lonely or having a hard time. I'll just grin and bear it, but yesterday, I posted about how I felt, and I was met with kindness. Today, I wrote and had passion again, and I finished the chapter." Well, Graveyard Kitchen, I'm definitely understanding of where you're coming from. I think all of us go through those phases where we feel overwhelmed and the creativity kind of dissipates. Sometimes it's life, sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's imposter syndrome, or a combination of all three. But as you said, you posted about it, which is something I recommend you do because the community is always super supportive in that way. And I'm really happy to hear that you were met with kindness because that's always how I've known this community to act. And I've always known everyone here to be super supportive. So I'm really happy that was your experience as well. Elizabeth Hagenlocker says, "On a scale from 1 to 10, I would say I'm probably also about a 5. I've been operating at more of an 8 or 9 for the last few weeks, so I feel like this is a bit of a natural lull. I'm also working more this week, so I'm tired in that regard. I feel content to be at a 5 right now because I'm not entirely lacking motivation. I just know this is going to be a slow week for me, and I'm embracing it a bit. Before I really committed to Substack about a month ago, I hadn't written anything substantial in years. It's the longest writer's block / slump I've ever had. But Substack has been so welcoming and inspiring that it's reignited something in me that I kind of worried I had lost. I feel like myself again. Writing was such a huge part of my identity growing up, and after getting my degree and doing almost nothing creative with it, although I do write professionally, I felt like a fraud. Now, thanks to Substack, I'm developing an entire interconnected universe for my stories. I think giving myself permission to just do what works for me, what inspires me, and sharing that with other people has undone a lot of the damage that my degree did. I wasn't allowed to write genre, and I was often told that publishing in lit mags and pursuing an MFA was the only path to being a serious writer. The first tonal shift was a few years ago when I started reading regularly again. College burnt me out on that hobby too. My degree did make me a better writer in some ways, but in the years since, I've learned that above all else, you have to show up, and it's much harder to show up when you're not writing about the things that excite you and light you up. Now, when I need to get out of a funk, I just switch to something else. Or I lean on one of my other hobbies, like knitting or sewing, which I use as valuable thinking time. I love getting to multitask in a way that is still the act of creating. And that's really, really good advice from Elizabeth. And as someone who has been juggling professional and writing and creative writing my entire life, I sympathize heavily with some of the things that she struggled with there. But, it's like she said, finding Substack, finding this community, it really helped her reignite that creative side. And it sounds like she's doing an amazing job of embracing the highs and the lows that just come with being human. So thank you, Elizabeth, for that amazing input. The Autumn Star says, on a scale from 1 to 10, I think I'm a 7.5 today. I'm pretty positive these days all around. My only glum goblin is my persistent desire to find a literary agent and next step publisher for Hunter's Moon. But I surrender that need to the goddess and move on. I am definitely one of the people who needs to write. A few years ago, life totally overwhelmed me and I stopped writing. I sank into a functioning depression. I got up, I did all the things, but I had no joy. Finally, I saw a therapist, and I started writing. 3 novellas, a full novel, and a bunch of short stories and poems later, I'm back to my happy, healthy self. And the community here keeps me motivated and inspired. I love y'all. Writer's block. I've never experienced it for more than a few days. It's usually when I'm not sure how my character is getting out of a pickle. I just lay in the dark at night and imagine. Eventually the answer reveals itself. And then I get on with the story. I love this, Bradley Ramsey. You really build the community here. Be well. Thank you to the Autumn Star. Really appreciate those kind words at the end. And I totally agree. Sometimes you really just have to take a step back and let your subconscious work the problem, and the answer will reveal itself. And once again, I also completely sympathize with, life being overwhelming and how that can stop your writing. It happened to me. You've probably heard me talk about it on the show multiple times if you're a long-time listener, and it's one of those things where I'm cognizant of it not happening again. I'm trying to maintain balance, and I recommend obviously the same to everyone listening. So thank you again to the Autumn Star for that. And honestly, amazing responses to everyone this week who weighed in. Going forward, new writing discussion topics will be posted in my subscriber chat every Wednesday, so keep an eye out if you'd like to participate and have your answers read on the show. And now, without any further delay, let's get to this week's featured guest interview. All right, and this week's guest is someone that many of you may recognize. She's been here just about as long as I have, and in that time, she's become a force in the community. She's brought an entire connected universe with her, and more than that, she's been all over Substack, engaging with other fellow writers, running challenges, and calling out hate, racism, and sexism when she sees it on the platform, and ultimately making it a better place as a result. She's the kind of writer that I strive to be every single day. Someone who is uncompromising, unrelenting, and unstoppable. So without further ado, let's get to this week's interview with Nikki, aka the Nocturnal Narrator. All right, everybody, and this week I'm extremely excited to welcome to the show an author of dark speculative fiction and dark tales who you may recognize. Please welcome to the Saved as Draft podcast, Nikki, aka the Nocturnal Narrator. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I'm absolutely honored.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Very excited to learn more about you and your creative journey and everything else you got going on. So let's start by having you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
Okay. So I've known from a very young age that I am not good with strict routines and I'm terrible with authority. So I have cycled through a lot of different career fields in my relatively short lifetime. I've worked anywhere between like behavioral health to working in other healthcare industries, personal training, etc. And so I pull a lot of my stuff from all of my experience, but I thrive in where there's like no structure, very limited amount of structure. And eventually I kind of caved and gave up the whole 9 to 5, like trying to overwork myself in like a kind of corporate area and started writing full time. And so here we are.
That's amazing. So, how long have you been writing full time then?
Oh, it has been less than a year that I've been doing it for full time. I mean, I've written a lot in other areas besides fiction, but full time fiction writing, yeah, less than a year.
Okay. Well, I mean that's amazing. I took a similar leap years and years ago. So I commend you on doing that. And obviously wish
It's
you all the best.
scary.
It is very scary, yes. But I'm sure you'll land on your feet. Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
So, how would you describe when it comes to like your writing style and your fiction? How would you describe your kind of unique writing voice and style?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that it is character driven is the biggest one. I like stories that are very focused on specific characters and perspective, stuff like that. And I also like the quietly haunting things. So psychological thrillers or, messing with everyday, very grounded sci-fi stuff is kind of in my wheelhouse. And I'd also say I like to be very immersive and kind of oh, I don't want to say show, not tell. That's so that's so cliche, but I really like to pull readers some like just away from where they are in that moment, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, that makes complete sense. Yeah, and show not tell. Yes, it might be a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason because it is true. In a lot of cases.
Yeah, yeah. Some people, like the way that I see it, some people, they are very talented writers and they write personal essays or they write poetry or even fiction where their goal isn't to take you somewhere, it is to like not give you nightmares, things like that. And so I'd say that like my goal is to rip the reader out of their current reality and shove them somewhere uncomfortable.
So speaking of kind of putting the reader in a different reality, all of your stories, from my understanding, they exist in a shared universe called the Void. Is that right?
That is correct.
So as someone who has my own kind of shared universes and stuff, I'm curious, where did that idea come about, and what inspired it, and what sort of ways do you kind of draw connections between your works to kind of fit them into that shared world?
I'm actually so excited that you asked me this question because I have something huge in the works that's coming up pretty soon. So I'll touch on that in a minute. But so to me, I have always been very ADHD, not just in like my brain, but in the way that I work, the things that I do. And that also affects genres that I write in, themes that I play with, character arcs, stuff like that. And so I've never really fit into a niche, I guess you could say, as far as fiction goes. And so to me, The Void came about because I'm like, okay, well, what if I take all of these stories, whether they're sci-fi, whether they are psychological thriller or what have you, and I put them in my own universe where I can make the rules and I can cross genres so that I don't get anybody telling me that I'm like screwing with anything because of, certain niches that I just don't exactly fit into. So I was like, wow, I'll just make my own.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I think I took a similar approach with some of my universes because it was one of those things where it was like, if I do these on their own, like they might work, but bringing them together
Yeah.
allows me to like define the rules, as you said.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's great. So you mentioned you have something big in the works. Do you want to
Oh,
talk about that
yeah,
next? Is that related to your universe here?
it is. So I have a very short series that I've been working on for a few months that I've published and unpublished and edited and kind of went crazy with. But my Confessions of a Voyeur series, I don't want to spoil any of that, but in that series, your main character is his name is Brad, and he is an FBI agent that seemingly becomes, he crosses boundaries with somebody that he's working with on a case and becomes sort of attached. And then he starts suspecting her of all these things. And then the people around him start saying that he's going crazy, that he's just obsessed with this woman because they've crossed these professional like bounds. And so he is actually going to make an appearance in both the Olivia and Ben series that I'm working on.
Hmm.
Without giving too much away, he does still like Brad is currently on administrative leave in his little storyline, and Olivia happens to be struggling with some very persistent FBI agents, so she's going to need a hand. And I decided to write a chapter where I kind of cross those two stories so I can fill in parts of Confessions of a Voyeur from like Olivia's point of view. So readers of that get an entirely different perspective. And I also get to shove different like parts of the void together.
I like that connection a lot with the FBI agents. That makes a lot of sense, and I feel like it's going to work really well. Is the Confessions of the Voyeur series? Did you already start that one, or is that an upcoming series?
So I've already started that one. Chapter one or part one is out for good. It is I'm done touching it, but there are a few more parts after it that I have gone back and reworked multiple times, and that's actually kind of part of my goal with mixing Olivia and the Confessions of a Voyeur series is because there are certain aspects of Confessions of a Voyeur that I've never been certain on, so I can scrap those and just rewrite something entirely different. So I get to cross that off my list while also working out Olivia's story.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So in total, then, how many different series do you have going on right now, kind of simultaneously on Substack?
Whew, okay, that is such a good question. Let's see. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would have the two that I am mostly focused on are Olivia and Ben. Confessions of a Voyeur was one that it's kind of intermittent. I started it when I first started Substack back
Hmm.
in February. And then I have a a very large series in End of the World Influencer. That one's kind of on the back burner. It's more of a once a month release. We're actually in like the second part of that series. I think that's all I'm working on right now. I also do have my Project X series, but that one for now has been concluded. It's kind of a dystopian series where I take real headlines and I turn them into crazy dystopian stories, kind of like Black Mirror does in a way. But I think that's it for now.
No, I love it. I love the scope of everything that you're working on. It's very ambitious, but in a
I
very
told you I
cool.
can never stay in one area.
I mean, hey, that's a great way to keep your audience engaged, right? There's always something new.
Yeah, and it's a good way to keep, I feel like it's a good way to keep me sort of engaged too, because what I noticed is that, especially with series, if I don't have a set plan in mind for a certain series, and I start getting into that pattern of writing because I feel like I have to write or I have to do this chapter, I find myself writing really crappy chapters. So
Mm.
it's nice to take a break and go, okay, I'm going to stop writing about a serial killer for a minute. I'm going to go write about space witches and it's a good change of pace.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I always tell people that you should have multiple projects going on at once because it keeps your mind sharp. You don't get
Absolutely.
too far into the weeds with any one of them. So that's smart. So all these series they exist on Substack right now, right? Is your work anywhere else? Like, do you have any published works on like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or anything like that, or is everything just kind of headquartered on Substack?
Everything is pretty much headquartered on Substack. Funny story, I'm banned from Amazon.
Oh wow.
But that's okay. It is totally okay. But other than that, yeah, everything's on Substack.
Okay, cool. Good to know. So, my next question then is, say someone's listening to this interview right now and they haven't read any of your work, and I know you have a page dedicated to this, and we can include that in the show notes. But where would you recommend, just kind of off the cuff, for someone who wants to check out your stuff? Where should they start?
Okay, so would you like me to touch on that post that I have?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Perfect, because I feel like it's a very good summary. On my homepage, and I actually just put this, I made some edits. There's a big feature, and it's titled Lost. That's the point. And so it actually kind of functions sort of like a menu, I guess, for a game. So you get to the very beginning where it explains the void, how every story, commentary, and observer you meet exists in a single, internally consistent, shared universe built for readers who crave dark, speculative fiction, layered continuity, and narrators who should not be trusted. So after you get through there, we have the table of contents, and that's all you need. If you're coming to my page and you're like, I want something fast, quick, I want a standalone, there's a button that says fast travel to standalone fiction. If you're the type of person that likes to get really deep into lore, like most like 40K fans, then the Lost post has everything you need from a meet the staff page to a void handbook. That's absolutely where I would start.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I'll make sure to link to this post in the show notes of the episode because yeah, I do think it's a great sort of, like choose your own adventure kind of setup here. You can kind of go wherever you'd like.
Yeah, and I have found that my brain operates very uniquely, and unfortunately, not a lot of people can read my mind. So that's what this post is. It's just like a stream of consciousness. Okay, do you want to just come here temporarily, read something really funny and move on? What can I do for you? How can I help?
No, I love it. I love it. I think that's great. So, yeah, I mean, with all these different series going on, and like all these different ideas that you have kind of in your shared universe here, where do you get your inspiration from? Like where do you kind of go to get inspired? Because, obviously you have no shortage of ideas, and I'm curious about where they come from.
I draw inspiration from a lot of areas. I've talked about it before, but one of my main inspirations and one of my biggest influences is Kendrick Lamar because I really like the way that he tells stories. I really like how he messes with perspective and all of the double or triple entendres and just it's so layered.
Hmm.
All of his work is, and that's what I strive for in my pieces, where you can read something that I wrote two, three, four times and catch something new every time is what I strive for.
Okay.
And then as far as the rest of it, I would say that headlines are a really good one, especially if you like dystopian fiction. You can pull some really good stories out of that.
Mm.
And as far as horror goes, my older sisters used to put me to sleep to like Chucky or Nightmare on Elm Street or stuff when I was a kid. So I tend to pull from the, I guess you could say, like older horror styles. Um, and kind of leaning on the oh, I forgot what the word I was going to say. But yeah, you get the point. It's more just like the older horror where you suspend your disbelief and everybody is supposed to be a teenager, but they look like they're in their 30s. It's
Right, right, right. No, that's great. I also remember kind of being attached to horror from a very young age, and probably seeing some certain movies that I was too young for, but it
oh
definitely
yeah,
it set me up to be a good horror writer. That's for sure.
exactly.
Okay, great. So, hey, another question that comes to mind is obviously in this episode, I'm going to have a few cameos from Jeffrey the Void Demon. So, I wanted to ask you, like, where did that character come from, and how are you connected to it? What's the history there?
Okay, so this is quite the funny story actually. I I created a false beef on Substack in one of my newsletters because I was writing the Void updates, and that was when I was kind of working out and testing SEO and all that fun that Substack algorithm stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't like clickbait and I don't like real drama. So I created a fake beef with an entity on Substack who runs a self-help blog named Jeffrey the Void Demon. And in one of my newsletters, I really kind of I talked a lot of smack on Jeffrey, and I was like, we finally surpassed him in subscribers. Like, haha, screw you. And so everybody loved that piece so much, and they liked the email update with like Jeffrey's commentary and stuff that I decided to make him a regular a regular visitor to the void. Well, he comes from the void, but you get the point. So we decided in universe to join our Substack publications together. And he's done a couple of features on my page of how he thinks humans can optimize their existence and stuff like that. But it actually just started all from a completely made up beef that I generated to test SEO.
Wow, that is probably the greatest answer. Not at all what I expected, but the greatest answer I could have asked for.
Well, thank you. I see that's what I'm saying. My mind, I work in some weird ways, and I'm the friend that needs a warning label. I require a lot of explanation, but you know,
Oh my goodness, that is fantastic. I'm so glad I asked.
that was the perfect question.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I have some surprises in store for this episode with some of the for example, I
Oh,
always do a comedy
yes.
skit at the beginning of every
I'm
episode.
so excited.
So now that I know the background there, I might add a few more jokes, but
Yeah, I refer to him as so when we first started our beef, which I feel like Venom right now, but when I first started this made up beef, Jeffrey was writing his self-help blog, and in my head, Jeffrey is like the guy at the office that's a little bit odd, that, isn't very social, doesn't really talk to the other void demons, kind of hangs out at the water cooler. And in his spare time, he's scrolling the internet. He stumbled on Substack and he's like, oh my gosh, these humans are trying to help other humans be better. Unfortunately, like, humans are stupid because he's a cosmic being. So he's like, I bet I could do this better. And that's his way of being social, is getting on Substack and writing these blogs. It's,
But that Jeffrey little nugget there was fantastic. All right, so the next question that I had is sort of shifting towards the community, because you're also really involved in the community on Substack, and I noticed you just announced some winners, I think, recently from one of your challenges. So my question for you is, how are you involved in the community? What kind of stuff do you have going on, and what advice would you give to others who are maybe joining, now and are trying to figure out how to kind of participate in the community?
Okay, so as far as what I've got going on, one community thing that I like to do is what I call collaborative storytelling. And I don't know if many people are familiar with it, but it's the idea that you write one cohesive story with like a group.
Okay.
And I know that writing can be very kind of an isolating hobby or career. And so there is always good can come from community activities. So I do a monthly challenge, which I am kind of behind on, where readers vote on things like genre, theme, character archetype, things like that. And then at the end of the month, I pull together the criteria for the story and give everybody that month to write anything in the criteria. It can be fiction, nonfiction, poem, it could be your will. I don't know. But as long as it fits the criteria, there's usually like 3 pieces, whether it be, like I said, genre, theme, and then they submit a story. And there is no criteria for me picking the winners for that month. I think that's the biggest and my favorite part, is that it's not always going to be the person who writes the best or the person who really took advantage of the challenge. Sometimes it's the person who their piece is going to challenge me the most. And so I usually pick 2 to 3 writers and take their stories, their poems, what have you, and string them together into one cohesive narrative that usually ends up being something completely opposite from what they've written. So that's a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that we recently just did was a romantasy, and the requirement for like a character was anti-hero, and the like theme was someone's got amnesia, and there were so many good entries for that one. So let's see. What advice I would give to others who are trying to get involved with the community? I would say to put your stuff aside for a moment
Mm.
and focus on reading and kind of getting a feel for the environment, curating your feed, surrounding yourself with supportive writers in whatever genre or area of Substack that you're in. Spend a few days, engaging with them, commenting thoughtful things on their work, and kind of just getting a feel for the layout of the land, I guess you could say. And just put yourself out there. I've found that, as long as you put in a decent effort to not just, you're on Substack to read and to learn. And so as long as you're not just showing up and writing something and then logging off, you're going to do just fine.
Right. No, I think that's phenomenal advice. Yeah. And that's a great way, like you said, to learn and to get involved and to just, great writers are also great readers, right? Like
Absolutely.
you need to absorb other types of writing and other people's, style and voice and stuff, and it inspires you obviously with your own work. So I think that's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice. So how long have you been on Substack, by the way?
I think I've only been on Substack since February. I got to Substack via a random Google search because I had tried a couple of other sort of similar websites,
Yeah.
and I was putting my writing out there, and I just could not. There was not really any community aspect to a lot of those sites, and they're not very transparent about like algorithm stuff or SEO or like how you grow a newsletter and stuff like that. And so I got very fed up and I went to Google and I'm like, what is the best like platform to write on right now? And that's how I wound up on Substack. So a lot of my work does come from previous like blogs or things that I have published and then taken down. So that's how my Substack got super filled up super fast, but it has only been a few months.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I started in January, so that's
Oh
interesting to
wow.
know. Yeah, yeah,
But I
and
remember when I first joined Substack, you were one of the very first people that actually like I had a like meaningful conversation with. So that's crazy that you were only like a month earlier.
yeah, January 6th, I think, or something like that is when I joined.
Oh wow.
But
Look
it's
at you.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean it's crazy because honestly, I had a very similar journey as you did, like just basically being a writer online, where I was on a platform called Vocal for
So
like
glad I'm not alone.
yeah, I was on a platform called Vocal for 4 years or so. Um,
Okay.
and it was basically like a more fiction focused version of Medium, and it had a decent community element,
Ooh, okay.
but they also do like month like not monthly. They have challenges kind of going on all the time, every month.
Oh,
And so that's what initially drew me to the platform. But it was so funny because after being on there for 4 years, I celebrated all over social media having 1,000 reads. It took 4 years to get 1,000 reads.
that was exactly where I was too. That I was so lost and confused. And then also the nice thing about Substack, I had no idea. I had a little bit of an idea about SEO because I've done it in like other fields that I've worked in, but nothing about it from this perspective. And Substack doesn't help you out a lot, but they give you a couple of signals
Yeah.
like in the settings and the dashboard and stuff. And I found that I've learned so freaking much being on Substack in the short period than I have known about writing fiction online in my entire life. I swear.
Yeah, no, and you bring up a really good point about the SEO stuff because I have also worked with it from time to time over the course of my professional writing side of things, in my career. So I guess a question then that I have for you is, do you have any kind of off the top of your head sort of SEO tips for writers on Substack? Because I know a lot of us probably don't really put a whole lot of thought into it, and obviously it's an important part of a strategy.
It really is. Okay, so the one thing that I really like about Substack, and this is one thing that I ignored in the beginning, and you should absolutely not ignore, is that when you are typing up a post in the little settings button, there's a feature for SEO options, and you do not want to like let that fill itself out or ignore it. It is so, so important because that is basically what Google is scraping, right? So you want to make sure that your SEO title includes keywords that like you would Google to find your stuff. So I write dark speculative fiction, and a lot of my titles that if they don't already have their own titles, I'll put like dark speculative fiction and then the title of the piece, because if somebody Googles dark speculative fiction on Substack, then Google is going to pull up the what is the easiest for it to parse is like a good match. So keywords super important. That would be my biggest SEO tip, and like using the SEO options setting in the Substack drafts.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually really, really good advice. Definitely. Um, yeah, because it's one of those things where it's like, especially if you've always been a creative writer, like you're not going to
Yeah.
think about SEO, like
And I ignored it for months. I even went into the settings to look at certain things, and I saw the SEO options and I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about that. So I just ignored it and let Substack kind of fill it out. And I have screenshots that I might send you so you can see for yourself. But
Sure.
when I started caring about SEO around March or April, my there was like 100% increase in views and like traffic and stuff because Google is actually able to tell what my posts were about. So
Mm.
that's nice.
Right, right, right. Yeah, you bring up a really good point because as I'm sure you know, I often try to do articles about like just writing in general with like different tips and stuff. And
Yeah.
you make a really good point about SEO. So this is just off the top of my head, but maybe at some point in the future, I would love to kind of pick your brain about trying to put together an article on SEO for writers on
Yeah,
Substack
absolutely.
because
You were actually the person that got me into the SEO stuff because I read so much of your I call them the little guidebooks, but just experience, perspective, things that you've dealt with, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are things that I actually need to look into. So yeah, I'm absolutely, we can get together and discuss that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to put a pin in that for later because it sounds like you're the person to talk to. And obviously we could use screenshots too if you have like
Yeah,
examples
I
of
have
how
so many.
that's really really cool and excellent advice. Excellent advice. So for the rest of 2025 when it comes to Substack, you obviously we talked about some of your ongoing series and stuff like that. Do you have any other kind of big sort of goals or upcoming projects or anything you'd like to kind of announce or tease to the listeners here for the rest of
I
the year?
do. So obviously Olivia and Ben will keep going, but I know that there were quite a few people that really liked my seven series, which it includes End of the World Influencer and Epic of Erasure. And in both of those series, there is mention of a book that it's the book that can dethrone pride. If you know, you know. And it's mentioned so many times. And right now, I am actually in the process with my VIPs of writing the book using a playthrough of Stellaris.
Mm.
So Epic of Erasure and End of the World Influencer, the whole seven series spans over so many years, and we see the rise and fall of a lot of, we'll call them universes. And so we follow, it's very character driven. It follows Adam. And so basically, the VIPs and I were working on playing this game of Stellaris to basically see what happened to lead up to the world ending in the first series, that End of the World Influencer, where we first meet our main character. So that's kind of a big project that we're working on. I keep Google Docs so they can watch me like draft live write-ups of how certain playthroughs of Stellaris have gone, or what ideas I want to pull from this strategy that we used, things like that. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that's one of the biggest projects that I have going on for 2025.
That's fantastic. That sounds amazing. Yeah, I'm very eager to dive into that. Honestly, everything you're doing is interesting. So I'm gonna have to start setting aside more time to get to kind of get more acquainted with the void, as it were.
It feels honestly, you could, go and read everything that I have forward, backwards, and sideways, and it will all change tomorrow. So don't stress yourself out too much about it. But yeah, I like cross media. I like things like video games or even other stories. Anything crossover is again in my wheelhouse because I have ADHD. So I really like to do a bunch of different things at once.
No, for sure. And as someone who's been a gamer as long as I've been a writer, I have to ask. You mentioned Stellaris, obviously, but what other games over the years have inspired your writing or continue to inspire your writing?
Oh gosh, we could go. I could be here for a while, but um, there have been Warhammer 40K is a really big one, especially for End of the World Influencer and the other seven series because I like taking a look at a lot of my stories are kind of like up close and personal, and this one is more on a galactic scale where we're seeing rise and fall of different civilizations and universes and conquests, things like that.
Warhammer 40K is a really interesting an interesting one because I've jumped in and out of that universe over the years, whether
Yeah.
it's through different games or when I was a kid, one of my neighbors down the street had Space Marine figures that we would like paint together.
Oh,
Um,
that's I one of the characters in my like Ben and Olivia series. It's Ben actually. In his character sheet, I put like definitely paints like miniatures and figurines. Absolutely does.
yeah, it's one of those properties where it's almost like intimidating to get into though because there's such a depth of lore,
Oh
right?
my gosh, yes. And that's how I feel. That's how I felt about all of my stuff, and that's why I have that like lost post because I get lost just trying to keep track of certain things, and especially with things like Warhammer 40K, stuff like that. There's so many people that know so much, and it feels like you can never have enough knowledge to have a conversation with a fan. So
That's true. Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, well, yeah, no, I mean that's really cool. Like I said, as a gamer, I'm always curious, like what gaming does, for other writers in terms of inspiration. Like
Yeah.
it's something where
And to,
I'm always playing whatever I can find that's character and story driven because for me that's just going to translate directly into new story ideas.
oh
You know.
yeah. Oh, oof. I love like I have invested hundreds and hundreds of hours in Skyrim.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Oh, and Cyberpunk also.
Mm.
There's a lot of inspiration with my Somna series. I haven't talked about it too much on here, but it's kind of at a pause. It is practically a done work in progress, but it's all first draft,
Hmm.
and it's sitting at like somewhere between 125,000 to 150,000 words.
Wow.
So it's yeah, it is on the back burner and coming out in pieces, but cyberpunk-esque is definitely I pulled a lot of cyberpunk into the Somna series because of like Neuralink implants, futuristic sort of environment, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, given a series like that, where you have like, from what it sounds like, over 100,000 words, another question that comes to mind is, do you have plans down the road to do like physical published versions of any of these stories? Is that something you've considered at all?
I absolutely do. So as far as Olivia and Ben go, my first drafts are what get posted to Substack, but I do have an editor that has changed quite a bit. And obviously, I have beta readers for both of them as well.
Hmm.
So after the edits and the beta readers and everything like that, when I have a polished and cleaned manuscript, those ones I'm gonna actually send out. Like look for agents to get. I'm gonna try, do my best to dip my foot into the traditional publishing world with those. But with like Somna series and the Seven series, things like that, I am going to do an ebook, probably paid subscribers, VIP, stuff like that. But um, other than that, I think those are my plans.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm always curious to ask about that because I've talked to obviously other writers on the show here who are doing something similar where it's like, they're kind of putting the first draft of a story out there, serializing it and whatnot, and then they plan to, once it's done, sort of package it all together, publish it, or put it behind a paywall simultaneously, once it becomes an actual
Yeah,
book. So yeah, I'm always curious to know kind of how other writers are approaching that because traditional publishing is one of those things that it's always been kind of a dream of mine since I was a kid.
yeah.
So it's like, at some point I want to give it a shot, but I know it's so important in today's day and age, from my understanding at least, it's so important that you have a established sort of following and audience, which I think is,
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty new, but I completely have seen what you're saying, where it has
yeah.
become super important to have established yourself somewhere as like a fiction writer before trying to get published.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it is recent, but I've seen it time and time again. So
Yeah.
that's kind of I'm at right now. But every writer's journey is different, right?
Absolutely. I'm in a similar boat where with Olivia and Ben, my honest like answer for my vision for those is for those to be some sort of either like movie, TV, some other form of media because they are written pretty episodically. It's a so each chapter has a pretty good beginning and end, and then there's the cliffhanger that feeds the overall arc of the series. But as far as the Seven series with End of the World Influencer and stuff, my dream for those would be video games because they would be such good like RPGs. Oh,
Mm.
I think
Yeah,
about
that's
this a
the
lot.
dream. That's the dream. Yeah, have any of the stories that I write, or I think most writers would agree, get turned into a video game. An RPG would be perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's so many. That's what I love about Substack is that the reason why I'm so adventurous and I do so many like crazy things or like so many projects is because just Substack, the fiction writers on Substack motivate me in so many different ways. I don't think I have ever encountered a group of more talented, like kind, empathetic, wise, intelligent writers until I got on Substack. And oh my gosh, this sounds so cheesy, but it is so true. I felt like I stayed inside of a box for a lot of time and I came on Substack and now I feel challenged and I feel, excited to write every day again. And yeah, I think that's, oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. As someone who has spent my most of my adult life trying to find a real, true writing community, especially on the internet, it wasn't until I arrived here on Substack that I really
Yeah.
felt like I found it. And that's why, and I'm sure you would agree, that's why, as much as I'm on here promoting my work, I'm also trying to
Oh
nurture and grow this
yeah.
community. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like I said, I don't think I've ever like been around so many talented writers. So as much as I want to promote my work, I want to promote theirs even more
Hmm.
because it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that you are just sitting here on the same platform as me.
Right, right. No, it's consistently humbling and inspiring every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. So for the last part of the interview here, I want to address the elephant in the room, if you're okay with it.
Absolutely.
And for anybody listening, just for context here, so Nikki here, the nocturnal narrator, recently, I would credit you with sort of revealing the existence of let's just call it what it is, a neo-Nazi publication on Substack. And
Mhm.
this isn't the first time, from my experience, that I've heard of such publications being allowed to have space on the platform.
Yeah.
And but this was the first time that it's been so blatant, right? Like you shared a screenshot, obviously you censored it appropriately, but you shared a screenshot to kind of show everyone, what's hiding within our midst,
Yeah, like
right?
this is not just somebody that I don't like. Like they are a self-proclaimed like Nazi. So like you said, like call it like it is. I'm a very big believer in, we don't label things that don't fall into that label. But so when I say Nazi,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I mean, let's call a spade, and and that's exactly what it was. And so there's a lot of legitimate criticism, from you, from me, from a bunch of people about how Substack is not taking a stance on this, and we can absolutely talk about that. But something I noticed is that you took a stance on that, and I admire that wholeheartedly. And I was so like just blown away by how you just stood your ground, and you had people coming at you saying all kinds of horrible things. You had all the nasty Nazis coming out of the woodwork,
yeah.
and it really, from my perspective, just as an outsider, I was sitting there being like, I was worried about you and your mental health, and just like having to be kind of the voice of reason, when after kicking the hornet's nest, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, in the interview here on the podcast, because thankfully this podcast, it's growing really big. It's got a great platform. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about it from your perspective, and just kind of share, how you're doing, and give you a platform to talk about your experience here. And then obviously we can discuss some of the other elements, like I said, about Substack's policies and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like you really, I don't think it's mincing words to say that it was like, you're my hero for doing this. Like
Oh,
you really
that's
put
so
yourself out
sweet.
there. You put yourself out there, and you took a stand. And that's not
Yeah.
easy to do. So, yeah, let me stop yapping.
No, you're
So
not yapping at all. I really appreciate that actually. So what I will say is first and foremost, I want to recognize that Substack has in fact taken a stance. In my opinion, when you say that you're neutral and you are allowing Nazis to monetize on your platform and you're allowing them to spew hate speech and bully people off the platform, you're not neutral. You've taken a stance. That is very first and foremost on
mm,
that.
hmm.
Um, as far as the rest of it, so obviously when I saw the profile, I was like, "Holy heck! Like, what is this?"
Yeah.
And on a lot of platforms, those are not allowed, like hate speech and stuff like that, because everybody knows that safety is a prerequisite to free speech. You can't just bully all of the quieter people out of the room and then call it free speech, or. So I saw the profile. I took a screenshot of the profile and the report that I had sent to Substack because I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. And I then got spammed with like 72 hours of commentary. What I will say is I am doing wonderful,
Okay.
actually, and it's not sarcasm.
Right.
I'm genuinely doing great. This is going to sound extremely conceited, but just take it word for word exactly as I'm saying it. I do not care what Nazis or fascists think. I don't debate with Nazis or fascists. I don't care if they they can spew slurs. I haven't been offended by, hate speech or like calling me names since I was in middle school,
Mm,
right? Especially
mm,
being a woman and then a woman online. It's kind
yeah.
of like old news.
Right.
So genuinely, I am doing fine. I had an opportunity to make a lot of very funny memes. Um, and I just think that we know that ignoring people like that doesn't work, and
Right.
it just kind of lets them like think that stuff like that is okay. But we also know that they are like allergic to facts and intellectual conversation,
Hmm.
so having a debate with them is also pointless, and it
Right.
does nothing but ruin your mental health. Like you said, when you argue with stupid, they'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience.
Right.
So that my general stance is, don't let people like say that shit around you and be comfortable, but don't, not every single hill is worth dying on. So if people around you, or you notice a comment that says something super nasty or racist or whatever, let them know like this is not okay. You're kind of a piece of shit for this. Block them, move on. But the goal is, listen, people like this are very weak and very insecure.
Mm,
So the goal is to let them know, like, this whole hate stuff is like a toddler temper tantrum. Like, you're trying to get attention, you're trying to stir something up because you're lonely and you're bored and you're a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it, like, not intelligent. So I'm not going to waste my time on, the phone or laptop that I pay for to explain to you why you're wrong. However, that's not going to be allowed in my space. And after Substack took their stance of being pro monetizing Nazis,
hmm.
my general stance for like the writing community is, okay, if they're a truly neutral party, then that means that we are allowed to say how we feel about Nazis and be okay with that. And at at the end of the day, just don't let them feel comfortable. We don't
Right.
have to, like, just because Substack's like, yeah, they can be on our platform, it's fine. That doesn't mean we have to let them be comfortable on the platform. We don't have to run off, like, be run off of every area because a bunch of people that have nothing but hate in their heart, truly, um, need a place to be. I don't know why people think that that is covered under like free speech or the whole censorship thing, not wanting Nazis to feel comfortable on social media. But I think that social media is definitely not a right, and so the more uncomfortable I can make a Nazi or a fascist or a racist or a sexist feel, the better.
Right, right, right. No, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think you brought up a really good point too. By not taking a stance or being neutral, that is in and of itself taking a stance. It's allowing, as you said, the monetization of these
Yeah.
these publications. So
And people are being bullied off the platform with the like hate speech. And at the end of the day, if you're allowing that, the only people who are going to be left on your platform are hateful, predatory people who are nothing but negativity, and it's going to turn into a swamp, in my opinion, like Twitter did. So
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I sincerely hope that the community in general can sort of hold our ground and, as you said, just make them feel uncomfortable and like hopefully it's a war of attrition, especially in today's day and
absolutely.
age. But I it running or jumping somewhere else also doesn't sit right with me, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Because
So
they're just going to go there too.
right, exactly. Like, and here's the thing. I saw the writing on the wall with Twitter, and yeah, at a certain point, it's not worth fighting for over there. So, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that there's not ever going to be a point where Substack gets there, but I don't think it's there yet.
It's
And
definitely
so,
not there in my opinion. I think that the general phrase that I like to live by is, the company that you cater to is the company that you will attract.
right.
So if we can continue to make Nazis feel uncomfortable, so much to the point where they are like blocking me, that's great. That's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. That's what we should be
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Yeah. In the wake of your initial post, actually, within 24 hours, I had people messaging me screenshots that showed that publication in particular had changed both its cover image and logo to something else. I assume
Sure
in
did.
an attempt to hide, and instead of being so blatant about it. But that honestly, when I saw that, I just laughed because I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that like they got so uncomfortable within 24 hours. Like, imagine if we just kept pushing, you know?
Exactly. And that's the big thing is, for anybody should and can take a stand and make their like stance on those things very apparent. Like you do not owe anybody kindness or civility or a debate or explanation, nothing like that. You're about, you put your boundaries down, etc. But it's like you said, we're not going to be run off of another platform. We're not at the point where, in my opinion, Twitter got to. We're at the point where Nazis are now changing their cover photos and running on, putting a trench coat on, hat, concealing their identity, and that's a good thing. That's really good.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartely agree. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, and I'm very, very, very glad to hear that you're doing well. Like obviously in our conversations, it seemed like you weren't letting any of it get to you, nor should you, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where being on the internet, especially as you said, as a woman, it's just I just wanted to make sure that you were doing okay,
absolutely.
You were really kind of, from my perspective, kind of taking a lot of the heat, right? And
I did hit the hornet's nest. I took a bit of heat, but as I've told everybody, I very much appreciate how concerned everybody was. It is just, fortunately for me, like I would have to care about their opinion or respect them as people, which I do not.
Right.
So in order for that stuff to kind of bother me, and any time it's, the screen is a very cozy protector. So of course people are going to just go crazy with their words, but that's all they are. And like most things in the world, they have as much value as you give them.
Right. I think that's excellent advice in general as we continue to move forward as a community, and unfortunately there will be other situations where
absolutely.
We run into these types of people or publications. So that's really good advice, and I appreciate you sharing your perspective on it. And obviously I agree wholeheartedly. So yeah, that's all I had for today's interview. But Nikki, I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the show, for sharing your honest opinions here, and for telling us all about your projects and your writing. This was an enlightening, enjoyable, and very inspiring interview. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it too. Like I said, I was absolutely honored to be asked it all, and I had a very good time. Yapping.
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Of course.
All right, and thank you once again to Nikki, the nocturnal narrator, for coming onto the show and for sharing her thoughts on everything that's happened recently here on Substack. Make sure you check the show notes for a link to that post that we talked about, which will get you acquainted with her connected universe and all of the exciting stories within it. Trust me, it's one rabbit hole that you will not regret diving into. Next up is Echoes from the Void with Voidy and a special guest, Jeffrey, the Void Demon.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
Hey, Voidy, Jeffrey, thanks for being here.
Okay, just breathe. He's just like you. Just two void demons here doing their thing.
We are nothing alike, Voidy.
Ah! Did I say that out loud?
Voidy, it's fine. I know you're a big fan of Jeffrey, but let's just answer this week's questions, okay?
Yeah, of course, I'm good.
Okay, Mina Howell asks, if you could live in one video game, what would it be? For me, that's a tough one, because I play a lot of horror games. And let me tell you, I wouldn't want to live in any of them. Now, that being said, if there was a Devine game, like an RPG, I'd live there for sure. But in lieu of that, I think Skyrim would be a good one. Lots of great scenery, cool stuff to do, woolly mammoths, and I can go to the College of Winterhold.
Well, I think an important point that Miss Howell is missing here is that we already live in a simulation. So technically, the world is a video game already.
Oh my god, he's so cool!
Well, Jeffrey does bring up a good point. Voidy, what do you think?
Well, I, for one, agree with Jeffrey.
Okay, that works. Next question is a rapid-fire one from Anton Anderson. He says, is the cake a lie? Is 42 really the answer? And where did the other sock go? Jeffrey, I'll let you take point on this one.
Of course. The cake is not, in fact, a lie. The lie is the fact that you said you're on a diet. 42 is indeed the answer, but as Douglas Adams put it, we are still struggling to find the question. And for the last question, the sock went to the void. I know because
Lost socks are a currency there.
Wow. Okay then. Jeffrey with the hard-hitting answers. Anything to add, Voidy?
Make sure you bring a towel. Get it? Because Douglas Adams.
Ah, yes, I do get it. Very clever.
Jeffrey thinks I'm clever.
All right, those are all the questions this week, but thanks again for joining us, Jeffrey. Maybe we'll see you around in the void sometime.
If you find yourself in the void, you will be consumed long before we would meet.
Oh. Okay, then, well, I guess I'll probably stick around here. Anyway, thanks again to both of you. All right, everybody. And that brings us to our final segment, which is next week on Substack. Tomorrow we'll bring the power-up prompt for Saturday, and since fantasy has come up again, you can bet there will be a Divine angle, so stay tuned for that. More than that, next week we'll bring the debut of the final Divine Prelude. For those unaware, the Divine Preludes are standalone stories introducing us to members of the Order of the Pawn, who will star in the series of the same name. I added a section for the preludes to the Divine area of my content directory, but with this final prelude, I will also be adding a table of contents to all 6 of these stories, so you can check them out whenever you get a chance. And remember, every Divine story also includes free narration by me playing Finton Marybrook. Or maybe we're 2 different people, who knows. I've also got some more travel coming up, but I don't plan on taking another week off from the podcast, so most likely what'll happen is, later this month, we'll do an intermission episode where I'll record it beforehand. I'm thinking I might narrate a few stories from the community, so you can listen to that while I'm on my trip, but stay tuned for the final plan there. In either case, I'll be out here reading your work and supporting my fellow writers as always. I'll also continue to try and participate in prompts that people are doing, since I love doing that as well, but in the meantime, remember to take care of yourselves, stay hydrated, and whatever you do, keep writing. Thanks for another amazing week, my friends. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
Bradley, I got Jeffrey's autograph.
Oh, wow, Voidy, let me see.
Ah! My eyes! Ah! Why can't I see through time?
Oh, shoot, I forgot the sight of his name would shatter your psyche. Hang on, stay right there. I'm gonna grab you some ice.
Ice? How is that going to help?